Welcome to the Deep Dive, the show where we cut through the noise and get right to the good stuff, giving you the shortcut to being truly well-informed. Today, we're diving into something that really sounds like science fiction becoming fact. Imagine a digital assistant that doesn't just, read the code behind your screen, that actually sees it, like you do. An AI that perceives and interacts with your graphical user interface, your GUI, visually, by looking.
That's exactly right. Our deep dive today focuses on a pretty groundbreaking model called ShowUI. It's a vision language action model, or VLA, and it's really pushing the boundaries of AI interaction with digital interfaces. Its main goal, its mission, if you like, is to get past the limitations of those older language-based AI agents. The aim is to get us much closer to AI assistants that feel genuinely helpful, almost human-like.
And what makes ShowUI so fascinating, especially when you look at the research, the academic side of it, are these three key innovations. These are the sort of under-the-hood breakthroughs that let it do what it does. First, there's something called UI-guided visual token selection. It's a really clever way to handle all the visual data from high-res screens without getting bogged down. Second, interleaved vision language action streaming. This sounds complex, but it's about managing that back-and-forth dialogue and action, keeping context. And third, maybe the most surprising one from a research angle, is the idea behind small-scale, high-quality GUI instruction-following datasets. This basically proves that being smart about your training data can beat just having huge amounts of it.
Exactly. And that's what this deep dive is really about, understanding those core, kind of elegant academic solutions, the things that are actually powering the next generation of these digital helpers. It's almost like looking at the blueprint for smarter AI interaction.
Okay, so let's set the scene a bit. What was the main problem with the older ways of automating GUIs? Why do we even need AI that sees screens in the first place?
Well, the first wave of GUI automation tools, they primarily relied on what we call language agents. Think of early versions of large language models. They often worked by tapping into the text-rich metadata.
Metadata, like the HTML code or accessibility info,
Yeah.
stuff behind the scenes.
Precisely. They weren't actually looking at the screen the way you or I do. They were reading the structure, the code underneath. And this text-only approach, it has a really fundamental limitation.
Which is?
That humans interact visually. We use screenshots, we look at the app itself. We don't usually have access to that underlying code, right?
Yeah.
You don't see the HTML when you're trying to book a flight on your phone app. You see the button, the layout. That's the disconnect ShowUI is designed to fix.
Ugh, okay, that makes total sense. If we use our eyes, the AI should too. But just feeding it screenshots, that can't be easy, can it? What makes looking at a GUI, a user interface, different and harder than, say, an AI looking at a photo of a cat?
Yeah, it's significantly different. There are a few key challenges, really big ones from a technical standpoint. First, visual modeling is just incredibly expensive computationally. Think about a high-resolution UI screenshot 2K resolution, maybe more. That generates a massive amount of visual data. For existing models, processing every tiny detail efficiently, well, it's a huge computational load. Very inefficient.
So it's not just a big picture, it's that every tiny part of a UI could potentially be important, like a tiny icon or a line of text.
Exactly that. Which leads to the second challenge, managing this interleaved vision language action stream. GUI actions themselves are complex. They're not uniform. A CLI on a website is different from press home on your phone. Scroll might just be up and down on a web page, but maybe 4 directions on a mobile map app.
Right.
And the AI agent needs to be able to handle novel actions, things it hasn't explicitly seen during training. Plus, and this is crucial for tasks that take multiple steps, the AI has to remember the history, both the visual states, the sequence of screenshots, and the actions it took. That context is vital.
Wow, okay. It's like having a conversation where you need to remember not just what was said, but also what you were both looking at moment by moment. That's a lot to juggle.
It absolutely is. And then there's the third challenge, finding and using diverse training data. GUI data is just vast. You got web, mobile, desktop apps. They all look and behave differently. And the data itself is often imbalanced. Maybe tons of web data, but very little desktop data. Figuring out how to select high-quality representative data from this huge, messy pool is a serious hurdle. You can't just dump it all in and hope for the best.
These are definitely tough problems. It sounds like ShowUI was really engineered specifically to tackle these head on. So let's dig into that first big innovation you mentioned, the one with the academic focus, UI-guided visual token selection. How does it make the AI see screens more smartly?
Right. So this directly tackles that computational bottleneck we talked about, the high-res screenshots. Standard ways of processing images often chop them up into thousands of little squares or patches called tokens. Trying to analyze every single one of those tokens in detail, especially with the self-attention mechanisms in modern AI, well, it's just not efficient.
So the model gets overwhelmed trying to process like every pixel, even the empty space.
Basically, yes. And that's where the core insight comes in. This is the clever bit. Unlike a photo of nature, which is usually dense with unique information everywhere, UI screenshots are highly structured. They have predictable layouts, consistent color schemes, often large areas of just empty space or simple backgrounds. These bits don't carry much functional information. But conversely, really small elements, an icon, a text label, a button, those are functionally critical. You need to see those accurately. So the aha moment, the key academic idea, is to find a way to differentiate between the redundant background stuff and the essential interactive elements.
Okay.
The goal is to prune or ignore the irrelevant visual tokens without losing the details that actually matter for using the interface.
Okay, that makes sense conceptually, but how does ShowUI actually do that differentiation? What's the methodology?
This is where it gets quite innovative.
Yeah.
It uses RGB color information as a guideline. The thinking is that different patterns, like text fonts or icon styles, often have distinct color values compared to, say, a large background area. So it builds what they call a UI-connected graph. First, it divides the screenshot into those small visual patches or nodes. Then it looks at neighboring patches. If they have similar RGB values, it connects them. Using a method called union find, it groups these connected patches into larger connected components. So a big block of background color becomes one component, while a button with text might form several smaller, distinct components.
So it's essentially grouping pixels that look the same and are next to each other, assuming they're part of the same larger element, like a background or a big image.
Exactly. And what's really neat is that this naturally adapts. On a very sparse page, like maybe a simple Google search results page, you get fewer larger components because there's lots of white space. But on a dense page, like maybe a complex document editor, you get many more components because there were more distinct visual elements packed together. It adjusts to the visual complexity.
That adaptive part sounds really smart. So how does that grouping lead to actually selecting which tokens to pay attention to? How does it cut down the computation?
This is the crucial step. And it's different from older token merging techniques, which sometimes lost important spatial information. ShowUI's method is, during training, to randomly skip a portion of tokens within each connected component. But, and this is key for the tokens it does select, it retains their original position embeddings. It remembers exactly where on the screen they came from.
Okay, wait, so within a big background area, it only looks at a few representative pixels, but it remembers where those pixels were.
Precisely. This preserves the crucial spatial relationships, knowing where elements are relative to each other, which is absolutely essential for accurately locating and interacting with UI elements, like clicking a button. And remarkably, from an engineering and academic perspective, this whole method introduces no additional learnable parameters. It doesn't make the model itself bigger or more complex to train.
That's genuinely clever. It's like summarizing a crowd by talking to a few people, but remembering exactly where everyone was standing. What's the impact? Does it actually speed things up and maintain accuracy?
The results are pretty compelling. It significantly reduces the number of redundant visual tokens the model has to process, leading to a noticeable speed up during training, something like 1.4x or 1.5x faster. And importantly, it maintains competitive accuracy compared to baseline models that chew through every single token. Ablation studies where they test the system with and without this specific component confirm its effectiveness. It clearly outperforms simpler strategies like just randomly dropping tokens everywhere or using older token merging methods.
Okay, so ShowUI gets much smarter and more efficient about what it sees on the screen. That's a huge step. But then how does it figure out what to do based on what it sees? Especially when, as you said, actions are so different across web, mobile, desktop. This brings us to that second major innovation, right? Interleaved vision language action streaming. How does that work?
Yeah, this tackles the action side of the equation. The core problem, again, is that GUI actions aren't like natural language sentences. They're device-specific, right? Click CCAM on web, press home on mobile. They have different parameters, scroll, up, down, versus maybe 4 directions. And the model needs to generalize to handle novel actions it wasn't explicitly trained for. And critically for complex tasks, it needs that coherent history actions taken and the resulting visual states.
So how does ShowUI bring order to that chaos of different actions?
First, it standardizes them. It represents actions in a structured JSON format, something like action, C, LTC, value, login button, position, 150, 300. This creates a unified language for actions across different devices. But here's the really clever part for generalization, a key academic insight for handling novelty. The model gets a kind of README file in its system prompt.
A README,
Yeah.
like software documentation.
Exactly. This README documents each action's usage. It explains what CLSCK does, what parameters Scroll takes, and so on. This is brilliant because it encourages the model to interpret the action documentation rather than just trying to memorize a fixed list of actions it saw in training. It allows the model to execute novel actions in a function calling manner just by reading the instructions.
Whoa, okay. That's like giving the AI a user manual for its own ability so it can figure out how to use a new tool just by reading about it. That's powerful. Now, the streaming part, how does it manage weaving together the visuals and the actions over time?
It uses two main modes depending on the task. For navigation tasks, things that involve multiple steps like booking a hotel managing history is critical. Past actions tell you what you did. Screenshots show the visual result. You need both. ShowUI creates an interleaved vision action stream. So after the AI performs action A, the resulting screenshot B enters the model's input queue immediately after action A. This provides complete history information, letting the AI see the sequence. I saw X, I did A, now I see B.
So it builds that narrative context step by step. This happened, screen changed this, then I did that, screen changed again. That makes sense for complex flows.
Precisely. Maintaining that sequential context is vital, especially, they found, for mobile apps where the screen changes frequently. The second mode is optimized for grounding tasks. That's where you have a query like find the search bar, and the AI needs to locate it on the current screen. Here, the issue is that a high-res screenshot has tons of visual data, many tokens, but the query, find the search bar, and the action, outputting coordinates, are very short, few tokens.
Right. Seems inefficient to process the whole huge image just for one short query.
Exactly. So for these tasks, ShowUI uses a multi-turn dialogue approach. It tries to predict multiple action annotations for each screenshot within a single forward pass. Basically, it tries to answer several grounding questions about the same screenshot at once, making much better use of the expensive visual processing.
That sounds way more efficient for training on that kind of data. What are the overall benefits of this whole interleaved streaming approach?
Well, for grounding tasks, it demonstrably leads to faster training progress because it utilizes the training data much more effectively. And for navigation, it significantly improves performance, particularly on mobile platforms. The researchers emphasize that this visual context history is crucial for adapting to the frequent UI changes common in mobile apps. Again, ablation studies back this up, showing clear benefits for both data utilization and using that visual history.
Okay, so ShowUI sees efficiently, and it understands how to act and maintain context over time, but all this capability has to come from training data. This brings us to the third innovation, which you said challenges the more data is better idea. Small-scale, high-quality GUI instruction-following datasets. How does smarter data beat bigger data here?
This is a really interesting part of the research, focusing on curation over sheer scale. The problem, as we noted, is this vast, messy landscape of GUI, data web, mobile, desktop, with huge imbalances, and no clear best way to select what's useful. ShowUI's philosophy here is about strategic refinement and augmentation, not just blindly gathering more examples. It's about quality and relevance.
So how did they apply that philosophy to, say, web data?
For web data refinement, they made a key observation. A huge chunk, maybe 40%, of elements on web pages is just static text. Paragraphs, labels, things you read but don't typically interact with directly. And modern vision language models, VLMs, are already pretty good at reading text from images. That's OCR, optical character recognition.
Right, they can already read.
So instead of just grabbing millions of web elements, ShowUI took a data set and filtered out most of the static text. They focused specifically on visually rich elements, things like buttons, checkboxes, input fields, the interactive parts. This drastically reduced the dataset size, but kept the elements most important for learning visual interaction, proving that targeted quality was better than raw quantity for this specific goal.
That's smart. Focus the learning on the parts that are actually about visual understanding and interaction, not just reading text it already knows how to read. What about desktop data? You said that was harder to get.
Extremely hard to collect automatically, so desktop datasets are often tiny. This is where they used a really clever, almost meta technique for desktop data augmentation. It's a fascinating academic approach. They took a small existing desktop dataset and used GPT-4o, another powerful AI, with visual prompting capabilities for reverse engineering.
Using AI to make training data for AI.
Exactly. They gave GPT-4o examples from the dataset like, here's the bounding box around a button, and here's the text on it. Then they asked GPT-4o to generate different kinds of questions or instructions a user might have for that element. They prompted it for 3 types. Appearance queries, describe this button. A rectangular box with OK in white text. Spatial queries, where is this? It's positioned below the cancel button and to the right of the input field. And intention queries, what would I click this for? To confirm the settings.
Wow.
This process generated thousands of new, diverse, high-quality query element pairs from a tiny seed dataset. It massively boosted the diversity and usefulness of the desktop data, enhancing the model's ability to generalize.
That's seriously innovative. Using one AI's understanding to bootstrap another's training. What about mobile?
For mobile data, they specifically chose a dataset known for having valuable functionality descriptions, explanations of what UI elements do, not just what they look like or say. This helps the model learn the purpose behind the visuals. And finally, to deal with those huge imbalances, like maybe only 100 desktop examples versus thousands for WebSop, they implemented a balanced sampling strategy. This ensures that during training, the model sees examples from each data type, web, mobile, desktop, with roughly comparable probabilities, preventing it from just getting really good at web stuff and ignoring the others.
The impact of focusing on quality, augmentation, and balance must have been significant, right?
Hugely significant. It really hammers home the point that data quality matters.
Yeah.
The augmented desktop dataset, even though it started small, allowed the model to achieve performance comparable to, or even better than, models trained on much larger but less curated web data. That speaks volumes about data usage efficiency. Filtering static text from web data confirmed it wasn't essential for visual learning, reducing data size without hurting performance. And the balanced sampling strategy provided a clear accuracy boost, ensuring the model performed well across all interface types.
Okay, these 3 innovations, the smart visual processing, the action streaming, the quality data approach, they paint a picture of some really deep academic work. So pulling it all together, how does ShowUI actually perform out in the wild, so to speak? What are the benchmark results like?
When you look at the big picture, ShowUI is impressively efficient. It's a lightweight 2B model that's referring to its parameter size, relatively small by today's standards. And it's trained on a comparatively small instruction tuning dataset, about 256,000 examples. Despite that, it hits a really strong 75.1% accuracy in zero-shot screenshot grounding. That means identifying elements on a screen it's never seen before, based only on instructions. That's state-of-the-art for a model of its size and training data scale. It also shows competitive navigation abilities across web, mobile, and even online simulation environments.
That grounding accuracy is impressive, especially zero-shot. What nuances did they find in what it's good at grounding, like text versus icons?
Yeah, looking at the ScreenSpot benchmark results, they found text grounding scores are generally higher and transfer better across platforms. Makes sense, as text is somewhat universal. Icon grounding, however, is more challenging due to its visual nature. Icons can be abstract, very wildly. Interestingly, mobile scores are significantly higher for icons than web or desktop. The researchers suggest this points to a key gap, the missing of visual UI grounding data beyond mobile devices. We just don't have enough diverse training data for web and desktop icons yet.
So it's better at mobile icons probably because most of the good icon training data is mobile data. Makes sense. What about navigation actually performing tasks?
On mobile navigation, using the AITW benchmark, ShowUI actually outperforms models that rely on hidden HTML code or proprietary closed-source APIs. This really demonstrates the potential of a single model as a standalone visual agent, one that just looks at the screen like a human. And they stress that the visual history component is crucial here for handling app updates and changes. For web navigation, Mind2Web benchmark, the instruction tuning definitely helps. But navigating across different websites or domains remains challenging. This led them to conclude the bottleneck is UI visual perception rather than textual task understanding. The AI understands what to do, but struggles because it hasn't seen enough different website designs. It needs more visual diversity in its training.
Right, so it's back to needing more varied visual examples, especially for the web's diversity. What about online environments where things are dynamic?
In online environments, like MiniWob simulations, they found a substantial gap between ShowUI's zero-shot performance, just giving it instructions, and its performance after being fine-tuned on specific examples from that environment. This suggests that the kind of offline training it received is insufficient for the complexities of real-time interaction. To really succeed online, it likely needs a learning strategy tailored for an online environment, maybe involving reinforcement learning, to handle unexpected errors and adapt on the fly.
So offline training gets you far, but true online competence needs online learning. And did the ablation studies confirm all these parts were necessary?
Absolutely. The paper includes thorough ablation studies that systematically remove each of the key innovations: the UI-guided token selection, the interleaved streaming, the data strategies. The results conclusively show that each of these components individually contributes significantly to ShowUI's overall strong performance. They all matter.
Okay, so we know it works, and the research shows why it works, these clever innovations. But no system is perfect. What did they observe about its strength and weaknesses in practice?
Qualitatively, ShowUI definitely shows flashes of visual reasoning. It could do things like distinguish the correct mathematical operator symbol from similar-looking ones, or correctly associate a generic view help instruction with a question mark icon. That requires understanding visual semantics. However, it also has clear failure cases. These often happen with ambiguous queries, like if a user just says click sign in and there are two sign in buttons, the AI might guess wrong. Or it can confuse visually similar elements, like mistaking a zoom in button for a zoom out button if they look almost identical without more context.
Those seem like understandable limitations, especially with ambiguity. So Show UI is clearly a big step, but it also lights the way forward, doesn't it?
Indeed. It's a really significant advancement towards AI agents that perceive and interact with GUIs much more like humans do. The key takeaway isn't just about bigger models or more raw data, but about these kinds of innovative, academically driven solutions for the specific challenges of visual modeling, action management, and smart data use in the GUI domain.
So wrapping up, where does this research point next? What's the most exciting future direction for Show UI or models like it?
Well, the main limitation highlighted is that it's trained primarily on offline data. So the
Right.
really promising future direction, according to the researchers, is enhancing Show UI in online environments through reinforcement learning, letting the agent learn directly from interaction, trial, and error within a live or simulated environment. This would allow it to explore its limitations more deeply and adapt to unforeseen challenges much more effectively. And alongside that, there's the ongoing need for training data with better visual domain diversity, especially for web and desktop, to crack those tough cross-domain navigation problems where visual understanding is still the main bottleneck.
It's fascinating stuff. So a final thought for you, our listener. Imagine a future where your digital assistants don't just rigidly follow commands based on code they can't see, but truly understand and adapt to what's visually on your screen, learning and improving as they interact with new interfaces. What kinds of new possibilities does that open up for how you might interact with your phone, your computer, the entire digital world? Something to think about.